Have you ever driven past a closed storefront, paper on the windows, a for lease sign taped to the glass, and caught yourself wondering, what happened there? That is not a random thought. That is your brain tracking something it sees way too often. My name is Mark. I spent a probably unhealthy amount of time studying exactly what happened there. The mechanics behind why businesses that had a real idea and a real person end up dark. Here's the thing. It is almost never a what you think killed it. Right now, over 500,000 people a month are filing to start a new business. Most of them are not reading the failure data. By the end of this video, you're going to see your own situation, your business, your plan, your odds in a way that cannot be unseen. Stick around, because what comes next is the part nobody puts on the motivation posters. Let's start with the scale of what is actually happening right now, because without it, the rest of this does not hit hard enough. Before the pandemic, the United States averaged roughly 280,000 new business applications every single month. That was already a historic. Then 2020 hit, and something broke open that has not closed since. In January of 2026, monthly applications reached 532,319. That is 50% above the pre-pandemic average. Not for 1 month. Every month. We are not in a temporary surge. We are in a structural reset of who builds things in this country and who controls their own income. Now here's a question worth sitting with. Of those 532,000 people, how many do you think actually know what happens next? Roughly 147,516 of them are filing what the Census Bureau calls high-propensity applications. They are not testing a side hustle. They intend to hire staff, run payroll, build something real. And from December of 2025 to January of 2026, that number jumped 7.2% in a single month. The new year, new business surge is not slowing down. It is accelerating. Where is the growth happening? Retail and professional services lead the volume. But the steepest climb in the last 12 months belongs to tech-enabled service businesses. People building in 2026 are building lean, digital, and technology-backed. That choice, whether conscious or not, turns out to be one of the most important survival decisions a founder makes. More on that in a moment. Why is any of this happening? Treasury data delivers a blunt answer. Workers are not just chasing opportunity. They are escaping dependency. They are done trusting one employer with their entire income, their family's stability, their future. That is not ambition. That is survival instinct wearing a business plan. But here's the number that cuts through everything. The Census Bureau projects only about 30,000 of this month's 532,000 applicants will actually become employer businesses within a year. 30,000 out of 532,000. The gap between your application and your operating business is enormous. And most people walk into it blind. Here is where the math gets personal. And I need you to stay with this, because most people look at these numbers and assume they are talking about someone else. They are not. Roughly 20% of new employer businesses fail within their first year, and not month one, year one. You make it through the setup, the launch, the first clients, and 1 in 5 people who got that far are still gone by the time 12 months pass. The two primary causes are not bad luck and not the economy. They are poor cash flow management and lack of market fit. Two problems with known solutions. Two problems that kill businesses every day anyway. By year 5, your survival probability drops to approximately 49%. That is the coin flip. Flip it. Heads, you are still operating in 2031. Tails, you are not. Of the 147,000 high-propensity founders from January of 2026, statistically fewer than 73,000 will still be in business 5 years from now. Does that feel abstract? Good. Now make it real. Picture your own business, your investment, your family watching. Your year 5 is 2031. And right now, the odds say that you are the coin. Here's the decade wall, and it is worse. Only 34% of businesses reach the 10-year mark. So if you survive year 5, and you have not crossed the finish line, you have reached the midpoint of a race most businesses never complete. Now here's the rule change, the hidden threshold that flips the entire game. If you survive year 5, your probability of reaching year 10 jumps to nearly 70%. You go from a coin flip to a near certainty just by making it through that first stretch. Your resilience compounds. Your options multiply. Your business stops being a bet and starts being an asset. The threshold is year 5. Everything before it is about surviving long enough to reach it. and everything that kills you before it lives in the next two parts. Before we talk about the system that squeezes you from the outside, we need to talk about the force squeezing you from the inside, because this one is invisible, and it may already be working on you. 49% of adults globally name fear of failure as the primary reason they will not start a business. Nearly half the world sees the gold rush, wants in, and freezes, not because they lack the idea, not because they lack resources, because the fear of failing is louder than everything else. Does that sound familiar? Now here's the paradox that should make you angry. 40% of the global population sees a genuine, actionable opportunity right now, a real opening in the market, and 85% of those people, the ones who already see it, will never act because of perceived risk, not actual risk, the risk they invented in their own head before they ever tried. So what separates founders who survive from ones who never start? The Global Entrepreneurship Monitor studied this across dozens of countries. The number one predictor of entrepreneurial success is not capital, not timing, not your idea. It is self-perceived capability, your belief that you are the type of person who can do this. That conviction predicts your outcome more powerfully than your funding does, and that belief is collapsing. The generation that grew up drowning in founder content and startup mythology is less confident in their own ability to execute than the generations before them. That is what consuming the highlight reel without learning the mechanics it does to you. One more number. Less than 30% of new founders are planning for AI disruption right now. GEM flags this as the silent risk of the 2026 through 2030 business cycle. You can build something sound today that becomes uncompetitive in 3 years if you never model what your business looks like when AI does your core work for a fraction of your cost. The fear does not disappear when you start. It follows you in. And in part 4, it meets something even harder from the opposite direction. Here's the thing about the capital environment you're stepping into. It does not care about your idea. It does not care how hard you work to get here. It is structural, and it will squeeze you whether you are ready for it or not. Treasury data names access to credit as the single biggest bottleneck for new firms in the current high interest rate environment. Not your product, not your execution. Your ability to get money at a cost that does not destroy your cash flow before your revenue catches up. Here is what that looks like in practice. If you modeled your business on the low-rate world of 2021, you are now running a fundamentally different financial equation. The same plan, the same projections, radically different debt costs. Your business did not change. The math did. And most founders never model that scenario until they are already inside it. Now here's where your structure becomes your armor. Post-2020 startups are disproportionately digital first. Lower overhead, no expensive lease bleeding cash every month, lower capital intensity across the board. That is not just a cost preference. In a high-rate, credit-tight environment, the business that needs the least capital to survive is the business with the strongest structural chance of reaching year 5. You are not just keeping costs low. You are reducing the number of times the capital wall can actually stop you. The businesses making it through are not the best funded. They are the leanest built. They are the ones that constructed themselves to require less money at the exact moments when money is hardest to get. And ask yourself this right now. Have you stress tested your cash flow against a 90-day revenue gap? Have you modeled your business if your credit costs twice what you planned? If the answer is no, you have not done the survival math yet. And part 5 is about what happens to real people when they skip it. Let's stop treating the numbers like they live on a spreadsheet, because they do not. They live in people's lives. When we say 20% fail in year 1, that is someone who emptied their savings account, someone who sat across from their family and promised them this was going to work, someone who walked into their old job, shook their boss's hand, and walked out believing they would never need to walk back in. That 20% is not a statistic. It is a specific human moment, repeated hundreds of thousands of times, in kitchens and offices and cars and parking lots. And it does not stay private. Small businesses have driven over 70% of net new job growth since 2019. Every business that fails is also jobs that never got created, a neighborhood that lost something real, a family that lost its income. Your failure is not just yours. It ripples. That is why this matters beyond personal finance, and why the survival mechanisms are not just self-interest. They are something bigger. Now consider the fear data from the other direction. When 49% of adults globally cite fear of failure as their reason for not starting, that is not just a business problem. That is an entire generation of ideas that never got built. Problems that had solutions inside someone's head that never made it into the world. The innovation that did not happen. The jobs that did not exist. The cost of failure is measured. The cost of never starting is invisible, and it compounds every year. The self-belief that is declining in younger cohorts is not just a personal confidence problem. It is a structural leak in the next generation of builders. And if your self-belief is the number one predictor of your outcome, then what happens to the economy when that belief is quietly eroding across an entire generation? The failure data is not the disease. It is the symptom. Here is the cure. Everything in this video has been building toward a single question, not whether you will face these pressures, you will, but whether you are the type of person who sees the mechanisms clearly enough to build around them. That is the difference. Not luck, not funding. What you know and what you choose to do with it. Here's where the rules change. Survive year 5, and your probability of reaching year 10 jumps to nearly 70%. Your business stops being fragile. You stop trading time for survival and start building actual options. The ability to step back, to hire, to choose your hours, to say no to the clients you do not want. Year 5 is not a trophy. It is the threshold where your business earns the right to give you your life back. So how do you get there? Cash flow is the year 1 non-negotiable. The data names cash flow mismanagement as the primary year 1 killer. Model it ruthlessly before you need to. Build your reserve before the crisis arrives. The founders who shrink early before they run out of money are the ones still standing when their competition is not. Reactive founders manage disasters. Proactive founders prevent them. Treat capital access as a 12 to 18-month planning horizon, not a same-week emergency. Know your credit options before desperation sets the price. Build your model to function at higher rates than you want. The capital wall is structural. Your job is to reach it already prepared. Invest in your self-perceived capability like it is the asset that predicts everything because the research says it is. Mentorship. Peer accountability. Documented small wins. Every piece of proof you gather that you can execute makes the next step less terrifying and more inevitable. Plan for AI. Model the digital-first structure. Go lean everywhere the math lets you. The coin flip was never random. You just needed to know the rules. Now you do. Go load the die.